To survive, a multicellular organism must constantly monitor and react to two radically different environments, the outside world and its internal chemical states. Any shift in these environments is categorized as a stimulus. The organism's resulting action is the response. This simple input-output mechanism is the bedrock of all biological control. To manage this constant stream of data, the human body runs two distinct communication networks. The first is the nervous system. It operates as a high-speed, point-to-point electrical grid designed for low-latency, immediate reactions. The second is the endocrine system. Rather than routing electrical signals down dedicated physical wires, it relies on a chemical broadcast network, releasing hormones into the bloodstream to trigger slower, persistent, system-wide adjustments. Organisms do not rely on a single centralized master switch. Control and coordination depend on the constant interplay between these two parallel layered systems. By reverse engineering this architecture, starting from the microscopic base unit, scaling up to localized circuits, and finally the central processing organs, we can observe exactly how the body balances reaction speed with operational complexity. The anatomy of the human body functions as a highly optimized feat of systems engineering, perfectly calibrated to process information and sustain life. The foundation of the electrical network is a highly specialized biological wire, the nerve cell or neuron. It serves as the physical hardware and base unit of the entire nervous system. This anatomical diagram shows the structure of a single neuron. On the far left are the dendrites. Once received, the impulse moves into the main processing center, the cyton or cell body, which houses the cell's nucleus. From the cell body, the signal is routed down the axon, a long, singular physical extension that transmits the electrical impulse away from the processing center. Notice the segmented coating along the axon. This is the myelin sheath. It acts as biological insulation, drastically increasing the speed at which the electrical transmission travels down the line. The electrical impulse ultimately arrives at the axon terminal buttons, the final physical stage before the signal must bridge out to the next unit in the chain. That microscopic physical gap between two connected neurons is called a synapse. Because an electrical spark cannot jump an empty void, a hard conversion must take place. The electrical impulse is converted into a chemical signal to cross the gap. Once those chemicals bind to the dendrites on the other side, they ignite a brand new electrical impulse, continuing the transmission. While this structural logic remains consistent, neurons are highly adaptable, taking on a variety of shapes and sizes depending on their exact location and specialized function within the body. A single neuron is simply a conduit for an impulse, but chain billions of them together across microscopic synapses, and you generate the physical infrastructure for a complex computational network. Sometimes survival requires pure speed. In emergency scenarios where external stimuli threaten immediate tissue damage, the body cannot afford the latency of routing sensory data all the way to the brain for conscious analysis. The solution is a reflex action, an automatic, immediate physical movement deployed as a direct response to a stimulus, completely bypassing standard cognitive processing. This diagram illustrates the mechanism of a reflex arc. It begins at the bottom left, where specialized receptors in the skin detect an extreme environmental trigger, in this case, heat from a boiling pot. These receptors fire an electrical impulse that travels up a dedicated sensory neuron, carrying the threat data rapidly from the extremity toward the center of the body. Instead of traveling straight to the brain, the signal hits a localized processing hub, the spinal cord. Inside the spinal cord, a specialized relay neuron instantly bridges the incoming sensory data directly to an outgoing motor pathway. The command is immediately routed down the motor neuron, back to the original limb, triggering the muscle effector to contract and physically pull the hand away from the heat source. The central processor isn't left completely blind. As the local reflex fires, a secondary signal is routed up the spinal cord to the brain, ensuring the organism consciously registers the pain only after the physical reaction has mitigated the damage. This local reflex loop fires in milliseconds. Standard conscious decision-making, which requires data to reach the brain, be analyzed, and return as a command, is significantly slower. The reflex arc proves that the nervous system is hierarchically engineered. It purposefully trades computational complexity for life-saving latency reduction at the peripheral edges of the body. While peripheral circuits handle immediate local threats, high-level data integration requires the core hardware of the central nervous system. Because the brain processes massive amounts of delicate electrical data, it requires extreme physical protection. It is encased within the thick bones of the skull and suspended in cerebrospinal fluid, which absorbs external mechanical shock. This cross-section models the brain's macroarchitecture. It is structurally and functionally divided into 3 distinct evolutionary regions: the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain. At the base sits the hindbrain, comprising the pons, the medulla, and the cerebellum. This lower region executes essential involuntary biological protocols. The cerebellum coordinates physical balance and posture, while the medulla regulates continuous life support functions like blood pressure, salivation, and heart rate. Sitting just above it, the midbrain functions as a central relay network connecting the lower and upper regions, while simultaneously managing localized visual and auditory reflexes. Finally, dominating the top of the structure is the forebrain, specifically the massive, folded outer layer of the cerebrum. This region handles the highest levels of biological computing. It houses the sensory centers for sight and hearing, stores complex memories, and executes the logic required for conscious thought and intelligence. The physical structure of the brain mirrors its functional hierarchy. It layers complex conscious logic at the very top, resting directly on the solid foundations of autonomous life support programming at the base. The electrical grid is perfectly optimized for immediate tactile reactions. But how does an organism manage slow, long-term states like physical growth, metabolism, and sustained alertness? For these sustained operations, the body utilizes a parallel, wireless broadcast network, the endocrine system. Instead of electrical impulses, this system runs on hormones. These are highly specific chemical messengers synthesized by specialized organs known as endocrine glands. The delivery mechanism is entirely different. Rather than routing signals down dedicated microscopic wires, these glands inject their hormones directly into the shared bloodstream. This allows a single chemical signal to diffuse and reach target cells across the entire body. When you encounter extreme danger, the adrenal glands flood the bloodstream with adrenaline. This single chemical broadcast prepares multiple distinct organ systems at once for physical stress, initiating a systemic fight-or-flight response. For continuous metabolic maintenance, the pancreas slowly secretes insulin, acting to regulate the exact concentration of sugar circulating in your blood over a period of hours. This chemical network regulates itself through precise feedback loops. When pancreatic cells detect a rise in blood sugar, they automatically increase insulin production. As sugar levels fall back to a safe baseline, insulin secretion decreases in tandem. The division of labor is clear. The fast-acting electrical nervous system dictates the body's immediate tactical actions, while the chemical endocrine system dictates its strategic, long-term operating state. These two networks are entirely distinct in their mechanisms, but they do not operate in isolation. They are engaged in constant cross-communication. Deep within the brain, a neuroendocrine region called the hypothalamus acts as the physical and functional bridge. It translates high-level neurological thoughts and sensory data into commands that direct the endocrine glands to release specific chemical hormones. The nervous system provides the hardware for low-latency, point-to-point electrical speed, allowing the organism to navigate and survive sudden threats in the external environment. The endocrine system provides the mechanism for systemic, persistent chemical adjustments, maintaining strict internal homeostasis across billions of interconnected cells. Together, this dual-modality architecture yields a perfectly calibrated machine. It has the redundancy and range to execute a split-second reflex arc to pull your hand from a fire, while simultaneously managing the decades-long process of physical growth. Human biology relies on an elegant, layered information processing architecture, one where every single neuron, local circuit, and chemical messenger works in concert to sustain life.